Going to the University of Florida.
All right. His dad, Curtis, picks up Illinois.
In college football, recruiting has always been a pivotal piece to sustaining success and building a championship winning team. And as the years go on, recruiting has been such a pivotal piece of college football that some of these fans even follow these recruits from their freshman year of high school all the way to the senior year of high school. And I wanted to take a look at the college football careers of the last 10 number one high school recruits. And for the first player, we have to jump all the way back to 2013, where Robert Nkemdiche was ranked number one according to 247 Sports. Nkemdiche was a defensive tackle out of Grayson High School, where not only did he play football, but he also played two other sports, being basketball and track. Nkemdiche in football had 59 tackles and 18 sacks in his junior year, and not only that, he was on Max Prep's first team All-American team, and he led Grayson to a high school state championship. Now, his senior year, his stats dipped a little, but he was still able to land on Max Prep's second team All-American team. Now, Nkemdiche was going to follow his brother Denzel to Ole Miss, but he decided to commit to Clemson. In November of 2012, he decided to decommit from Clemson and then commit to Ole Miss a little while after. Nkemdiche's first ever collegiate football game came against Vanderbilt, where he had 2 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, and not only that, they even gave him the ball as he rushed for 11 yards on 1 carry. In his freshman season, he had 28 tackles, 6 tackles for loss, and he had a sack and made the All-SEC freshman team. And that same season, he played defensive tackle and defensive end, but in his sophomore and junior season, he moved to defensive tackle full time. And then those 2 seasons combined, he would have 53 total tackles with 10 tackles for loss, and he would have 3 pass breakups and 5 sacks. Now, Nkemdiche entered the draft, but he would be seen as a boom or bust type of player. He was the guy that had one of the best skill sets in the draft at his position. The only problem is he had production issues in college and he had off the field concerns. And teams decided to pass on him until the Arizona Cardinals took him with the 29th pick. And his NFL career really didn't go as planned, as 3 seasons with the Cardinals, he only had 10.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks in just 27 games. And due to his production and showing up to camp out of shape, he was cut by the Cardinals. Now, he would get signed by Miami and Seattle, but sadly, after some disappointing games, he will also get cut by them teams. But thankfully, he was signed by the Edmonton Elks of the CFL. He also looks to be in better shape than he was in his NFL playing days, so maybe he gets an NFL shot again.
Still upright. There's the magic we've been waiting for. A touchdown.
Now, the top recruit in 2014 was Leonard Fournette. Now, 247 didn't have him ranked as number one in their rankings, but Compositely, which is all the sites put together, had him as number one in their ranking. Fournette would play high school ball at St. Augustine High School in New Orleans, where he would be a 4-year starter. And to tell you how good he was in high school, Leonard Fournette would compile over 7,600 yards and 88 touchdowns in just his 4 years as a starter. Not only that, he would also be offered as a freshman by LSU, making it LSU's first ever offer to a freshman in high school. Fournette was named Offensive Player of the Year in his senior year and Louisiana Gatorade Player of the Year as well. And Fournette decided to commit to LSU, where the start of his career at LSU didn't really go as planned. In the first 4 games, Fournette only rushed for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns on 5.3 yards per carry. But even with the slow start, he was still able to amass over 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns during that season, including a couple games where he rushed over 100 yards. And his sophomore season was where he put college football fans on notice and would stamp his name as one of the best running backs during the 2010s.
One more tackle to break. He did. LSU.
His sophomore season, he would put up historic numbers, as in the first 7 weeks, he would rush for no fewer than 150 yards, and he eclipsed 1,300 yards and 15 touchdowns within the first 7 weeks. And with his dominant performances, Fournette was the favorite to win the Heisman, but that quickly came to an end.
Fournette, nowhere to run. Really?
LSU next game was against Alabama, and Fournette did not show up. He had 19 carries for 31 yards and 1.6 yards per carry. And this was the game that the Heisman changed hands, as Alabama had Derrick Henry, who had a 210-yard and 3 touchdown game. Fournette was able to bounce back though, as in the next 4 games, he would have over 100 yards in 3 of those games. He also had 22 rushing touchdowns, and he was just short of 2,000 rushing yards. And going into his junior season, Fournette was the favorite to win the Heisman, but it wouldn't be that easy. Before the season would start, Fournette would suffer from a high ankle sprain. But he was good to start the season, but sadly he would keep re-injuring that same ankle. Fournette would finish the season with under 1,000 yards, but he did end his LSU career with 3,800 yards and 40 rushing touchdowns. Fournette will later on get drafted by the Jacksonville Jaguars at number 4. And he wasn't bad for the Jaguars, as he had 2 1,000-yard seasons in 3 total years with Jacksonville. But the Jaguars decided that he wasn't worth the pay, and they cut him, and he ended up signing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He would spend 3 years in Tampa Bay, and eventually he won a Super Bowl there, and then he would move on to Buffalo. And with him being on the decline and him hardly getting snaps in Buffalo, he would probably retire in the next couple years. Now, Trent Thompson was the number 1 recruit in 2015. Thompson would play for Westover High School in Albany, Georgia, where in his junior season he would have 83 tackles and 12 sacks. His senior season was pretty much the same, as he had 84 tackles, 36 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, and 1 interception. Thompson will earn the honors of accepting the Defensive Player of the Year award by USA Today, and then he would commit to Georgia. Thompson would become a good player at Georgia, as he spent 3 years there, and it would all be productive. Thompson would then enter the draft, and some thought it was the wrong choice, as he was just projected to be a day 2 or day 3 pick. And Thompson just ended up going undrafted, making him the first number 1 overall prospect to go undrafted. And the best reason why I could find that he went undrafted was, well, off the field issues, but I could only really find one problem that happened off the field. And that problem was, well, during his sophomore year, he would be hospitalized with a medical issue, and it was unclear what that medical issue was, and he had to withdraw from classes. It was stated on a police report that Thompson had bloodshot eyes, he was unsteady on his feet, and he had dilated pupils. Then it was reported that Thompson was found with no drugs in the system, he had not been drinking. Later on, it was just found out that it was just a reaction from his prescribed medication. After going undrafted, he was signed with the Browns, but he was later waived on July 30th. Thompson would then play in the AAF until the league ended. Thompson would then go on to feature on rosters in the CFL, the AFL, the XFL, and the IFL. Sadly though, he was never able to find a home, and what I could find on Twitter is that he's a defensive line coach. Rashawn Gary out of Paramount Catholic was the number 1 recruit in 2016. Gary, as a senior in high school, would have 13.5 sacks, 55 tackles, and he would have 4 forced fumbles. This will earn him All-American and Defensive Player of the Year honors. Gary would then commit to Michigan, where his first season there was pretty decent for a true freshman. He will rack up 5 tackles for loss and 12 total tackles in just 12 games. Gary's breakout season will be his sophomore year. That year, he will earn first team All Big Ten honors with 58 total tackles, 11.5 sacks, and a forced fumble. Now, his junior season, he was coming in with lots of expectations, as he was on the preseason watch list for a bunch of trophies. Sadly, Gary would get injured, as he would have a shoulder injury, and he would be limited to playing time in September, and he would miss every game in October. So he wouldn't win any major trophies, but he would still be named first team All Big Ten. Gary would then forego his senior season and enter his name in the NFL draft, where he was picked by the Green Bay Packers. And he didn't see major success until his 3rd year in the league. Gary's 3rd year in the NFL, he had 9.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery. And after a good 2023 campaign, where he had 8.5 sacks, 2 fumble recoveries, and 2 forced fumbles, he will earn a 4-year, $107 million extension. The number 1 player in the 2017 class was Jalen Phillips, and his path to the NFL would be different than anybody else's on this list. Phillips was a beast in high school, as he had over 250 tackles and 30 sacks in his career. And he had 20 scholarship offers total, but he would choose to go to UCLA, and this is where things would start to go downhill for him. Just 3 games into the freshman season, he would suffer an ankle sprain, he would come back from that, suffer another ankle sprain, and then suffer a concussion. And sadly, months before his sophomore season started, he would get into a bad accident where a car crashed into him when he was riding his moped. And he would hurt his wrist in this crash, but not only that, he would suffer another concussion. Then, 4 games into his sophomore season, once again, he would get hurt, and once again, it would be a concussion. And due to these concussions and other injuries, Phillips would decide to retire. And after deciding to retire, he would transfer to Los Angeles City College, where he would study music production. Then in 2019, he would transfer to the Frost School of Music at the University of Miami, but he also intended to play college football there as well. Now, Jalen had to sit out in the 2019 season due to transfer rules, but when he got to play in the 2020 season, he got to show his full capabilities. In his 1 year at Miami, he dominated, having 45 tackles, 15.5 tackles for loss, 8 sacks, and 1 interception. Phillips went into the draft, and when he got drafted, he didn't have to go far for his NFL team, as the Dolphins picked him with the 18th pick. and Phillips' first 2 years in the NFL would be productive. He would combine for 103 tackles, 15.5 sacks, a forced fumble, and 3 pass deflections. In 8 games through his 3rd year, he was having a career season, but sadly he would tear his Achilles. A couple of days ago, it was reported that he was finally walking without a boot, so hopefully he's able to recover pretty well and have a long NFL career.
A foot race. Will they catch him? Touchdown, Tigers!
Lawrence's high school career is very decorated, and if you don't know about it, let me tell you a little bit about it. So Lawrence was a 4-year starter at his high school. Not only that, he was able to lead them to 2 state championships. Lawrence was also able to throw for over 3,000 yards in each year of his high school career, including his junior season where he had almost 4,000 yards and 51 touchdowns. And an important note, he also broke Deshaun Watson's Georgia State record for passing touchdowns and yards. Lawrence would then commit to Clemson, where he was still a great quarterback. In just his true freshman season, Lawrence would lead Clemson to a national title victory over Alabama, in which was the worst loss for Alabama in the Nick Saban era. He would be the first true freshman to lead his team to a national championship win since Jamil Holloway in 1985. His sophomore season would be about the same, as he would lead Clemson back to the college football playoffs. And where it looked like Trevor Lawrence and Clemson was about to lose to Ohio State in the Fiesta Bowl, Lawrence didn't let that happen. Lawrence would get hit and the Ohio State player would get tossed out the game. Then right after that, Lawrence rushed for a big touchdown. That play would snatch momentum from Ohio State, and after that, Clemson would go on to win the game 29-23. They would then go on to face LSU in the national title game, which LSU would beat them and give Trevor Lawrence his first loss of his collegiate career. And his junior season was about the same, as Clemson dominated the ACC, led by Trevor Lawrence, although he did miss 2 games, and they would go on to the college football playoffs, but this time they would lose to Ohio State. Lawrence would then enter his name in the NFL draft, where he was picked with the number 1 overall pick, and he was seen as one of the better prospects since Andrew Luck. Now, in just his 3 years in the NFL, Lawrence has helped the Jaguars reach the playoffs once. And he hasn't necessarily been the perfect prospect that people made him out to be. He still has a lot of room to grow, and we can only predict what he will be in the future.
Not there, and he is brought down as the pressure came from Nolan Smith, the rookie.
In 2019, the number 1 recruit was Nolan Smith. Now, I did struggle to find his stats from his IMG years, but I was able to find his stats before IMG. At Calvary Day School, Nolan Smith would rack up 88 tackles and 10.5 sacks. And Smith was so good in high school that they was comparing him to Khalil Mack. Smith would commit to Georgia, where in his freshman season he would play 11 games. And his best game that season was against Murray State, where he racked up 3 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, and 1.5 sacks. So in the season, he only had 2.5 sacks, 18 tackles, and 2.5 tackles for loss. His sophomore season consisted of the similar stats, as he had the same amount of tackles for loss, same amount of sacks. Only thing is, he had 3 more tackles than the previous year. His junior season was his best season, as he had 53 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, and even 1 interception. He was also featured on that Georgia team that won a national title against Alabama. Smith will return for his senior season, where it looked like he was going to have the best season of his career. Just 8 games in, he already had 7 tackles for loss and 3 sacks, but he suffered a pec injury that ended the season. And Smith wouldn't use his extra year of eligibility, so he would enter the draft, where he got picked by the Philadelphia Eagles with the 30th overall pick. In Smith's rookie year, he only had 1 sack, 18 total tackles, but it makes sense because the Eagles' defensive line was already established before he got there. So it'll be interesting to see how good Nolan Smith can be for the rest of his NFL career. Brian Brzee was the number 1 player in the class of 2020, and deservingly so. Brzee played for Damascus High in Damascus, Maryland, where he racked up 134 tackles, 80.5 tackles for loss, and 35 sacks. Brzee would then commit to Clemson, where he would make a big impact in his true freshman season. As a true freshman, he had 6.5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, 1 forced fumble, and even 2 pass deflections. He would play every game but 1 this season and help Clemson reach the college football playoffs, but that just wasn't the story for the next season. Just 4 games into his sophomore season, where they was playing NC State, Brzee would tear his ACL. Of course, this would end Brzee's season and be a fatal blow to that Clemson defense. Now, Brzee was able to return for his junior season, and he would stay relatively healthy. Brzee only missed 4 games that season due to family matters off the field and some injuries. Brzee would then forego his senior season and enter the NFL draft. The only problem is, though, his draft stock dropped due to his lack of production during his junior and sophomore season. But even with his lack of production, he was still able to go first round, as the New Orleans Saints took him with the 29th overall pick. And Brzee showed a lot of potential in his rookie season, as he had 4.5 sacks, 24 tackles, and 6 pass deflections. And most importantly, he played all 17 games this season.
Ewers from the pocket. Now he'll loft one downfield. A ton of air. Running up.
Quinn Ewers was the number 1 prospect in 2021, and he was a prodigy from day 1. In 6th grade, Ewers was offered his first scholarship from North Texas. And when he got to high school, he proved why he got offered that scholarship so early. Ewers was over 6,000 yards and 73 touchdowns in his high school career. Actually, Ewers was committed to Texas originally, then he decommitted in November of 2020, and then he committed to Ohio State. On top of that, he would actually enroll into Ohio State a year early to earn some NIL deals. And he only played one game at Ohio State as they already had their quarterback in CJ Stroud. Ewers would then enter the transfer portal and commit to Texas, the school he was already originally committed to. And he was projected to be the next great Texas quarterback, and he had a chance to prove people why early in the season. In week 2, Texas was scheduled to face Alabama. And early in this game, Quinn Ewers and Xavier Worthy was connecting with each other, but there was some passes that he missed on. And sadly, Ewers would get hurt and he would be out for the rest of the game. And he would miss a couple more games this season, but he was still able to finish with solid stats. And going into this past season, Quinn Ewers and Texas were supposed to be hyped up as this was going to be their shot to make it to the college football playoffs. But they had to play Alabama again in week 2. Ewers and company would show up as Ewers almost had 400 passing yards and 3 touchdowns in that game and they would win. And Texas did make it to the college football playoffs. But sadly they lost to Washington as Ewers tried to connect with A.D. Mitchell in the end zone. It just didn't work out. But who knows, with Ewers returning and them bringing in some pieces, they might make it back next year.
3rd down, Morris.
Whereas Hunter was the #1 player in 2022, where he would play both sides of the ball at wide receiver and cornerback. Hunter would set Gwinnett County records for single season receiving yards and touchdowns. And Hunter would actually shock people as he committed to Jackson State at HBCU over a big time program like FSU. But it made sense since Jackson State head coach was Coach Prime, where he's the greatest DB ever. In Travis Hunter's first season at Jackson State, he would make an impact on defense and offense, but mostly on defense. His defensive stats look like 2 interceptions for 44 yards, 1 touchdown, and 8 pass deflections. In the offseason, Coach Prime would go to Colorado and Travis Hunter would follow. And in just this past season at Colorado, you would see him use a lot more on offense. Hunter would have 721 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns. He would also have 3 interceptions and 5 pass deflections on defense. And I think it's safe to say Travis Hunter is going to be a top draft pick in the 2025 NFL draft. And last but not least, Arch Manning was the #1 recruit in 2023. And that talk around him is common when it comes to athletes' sons or relatives. Since he was Eli and Peyton Manning's nephew, people thought he was the #1 recruit because of that. Then you had the people that actually thought he was next up and going to be a great quarterback in the future. And his recruitment got so crazy that at one point, the Manning family had him shut down his social media. And one morning, Arch Manning just decided to commit to Texas. And due to Quinn Ewers and Malik Murphy being there, Manning only got to play in 2 games and only had 5 pass attempts. But who knows, maybe Manning lives up to the hype, maybe he doesn't. And as you can see, some players turned out to be busts, some turned out to be stars, and we have yet to see how some will turn out to be. But that's all for this video. Thank y'all for watching, and I'm out.